Leave it to Eric Engels to always give us the new weird little topics to start talking about here on the YouTube channel related to the Montreal Canadiens. What is up, viewer out there watching this video? Legarox back here, bringing you this time some more weird, interesting Habs discussion. Let's take a look at Eric Engels' article over here, his Canadiens mailbag from June 3rd, 2020. It's the article where he takes a look at questions that Habs fans have for him on Twitter, and he answers them accordingly. The article here for this edition is titled, "Could Taylor Hall and Torey Krug be free agent targets?" Now, that is a bomb. And first off, it does say first and foremost, could. So it is just asking a question here, not really saying that there is any interest or whatever, but as it goes, we will go over to the two tweets that ask Eric Engels about these two players separately. The first one goes over Torey Krug. It's a question over here from Messier Wade. He asks Eric Engels, is there a possibility that the Habs go after a left-handed defender like Torey Krug during the offseason? Now, for all you Habs fans out there who don't know just how good Torey Krug is, let's go over this a little bit, because I think when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens and what they need the most, left-handed D-men are very high up on that list. Torey Krug is a 29-year-old left-handed defenseman, 5'9", 185 pounds, so right away you know he'd fit into the Canadiens system because he's 5'9". But Torey Krug has been a consistent 50-plus point defender for the past 4 seasons. Yeah, I know he had 49 points last year, but that was in 61 games played. This is a guy who is very capable of getting upwards of 60, maybe 65 points, maybe even 70 if he plays a full 82. He's a nimble, small, left-handed D who's just really good on the power play, and this is the kind of guy that, profile-wise, fits into the Montreal Canadiens system perfectly, pretty much. This is what Eric Engels says in response to Wade's question. It's a great question. Forget about possibility. I would say it's probability that the Canadiens, who still have plenty of interest in upgrading the left side in their defense, even with Alexander Romanov coming over, would go hard after Torey Krug. We're talking about a defenseman who has 337 points in 523 games. Krug has 46 points in 62 playoff games, a Stanley Cup ring, and pedigree as a 5'9", 186-pounder who plays like he's 6'2", 215 pounds. The Canadiens would love to add him to the mix. But it's hard to imagine a player who spent so close to a decade with the Bruins choosing to play for the Habs, which is very true. Milan Lucic couldn't do it as a free agent in the summer of 2016, which I think is probably a good thing, much like Josh Georges refused a trade from the Canadiens to the Leafs and was instead dealt to the Sabres in July of 2014. Nice to know that those rivalries run so deep. It's what makes the sport that much more fun to watch come playoff time. Now, sensationalist comments about the teams and the rivalries all aside, I do believe it's a very understandable point to see why Torey Krug would not want to go to the Canadiens. Not because he doesn't think they're a bad team, or because he doesn't think that there's a system in place for the future, or not because the Canadiens can't offer him money, which they can, and we know that. It's mostly because it's tough for players to go to rival teams after spending so long as the bad guy. But obviously, though, Engels points it out, because of just how good Torey Krug is, it's probably more of a possibility that the Habs do indeed try to go after Torey Krug, and they do indeed try to get him to sign here. The likelihood of that happening is low, albeit, but at the same time it never hurts to try. So the Canadiens, with all the money they have and all the opportunities they're going to have with the free agency period, I wouldn't doubt that they go out there and try to entice anybody who's willing to bite on that Habs mojo to come to Montreal. And the same goes with the other guy. Let's talk about Taylor Hall as well. Scroll down in the same Eric Engels article. It goes over a lot of questions about the playoff run, Alexander Romanov unknown of whether or not he's going to play, Max Domi's status on whether or not he's going to play, but the little thing on Taylor Hall also goes over this too. It's a question brought up by our friend here, Stuart Brooks. He asks Eric Engels, do you know if Taylor Hall has any connections with the Habs? He grew up a lot in Kingston, Ontario. Maybe his parents were connected with Muller? Habs are one of the only teams who can offer a max signing bonus and a long-term contract with the cap not going up. This is where cap space comes to play. Signing bonuses, long-term contracts, all this stuff is something that the Montreal Canadiens can pull out of their pocket if they wanted to. Not all the teams that will be bidding on Taylor Hall will be able to do that, so it's definitely a big plus. I don't know that Taylor Hall has any connections to Kirk Muller, but you're making a valid point about Montreal's advantage in the marketplace, considering how well positioned they are with the salary cap, to make the kind of offer many teams can't necessarily make right now without shifting significant pieces out of place. Engels agrees with my point. I think the Canadiens have much incentive to try to add Hall too. He's a dynamic player who is effective at both ends of the ice, the type of high-end offensive guy they so desperately covet. But does Hall see the makings of a winner in Montreal? That's obviously going to be a big factor in his decision. So unlike the Torey Krug thing of him being a Boston Bruin for so long that it would probably be weird for him to suit up for the Montreal Canadiens, Taylor Hall's in a different boat. We just don't know if Taylor Hall is going to be interested in signing with the Habs because of what they have to offer long term. Now that's not to discredit Torey Krug's situation and say that Torey Krug wouldn't be thinking about that either. It's just the two narratives that Eric Engels has brought on in this article. As for Taylor Hall, though, I saw this very interesting comment discussion here on Reddit that I thought I would like to share with you here because it is kind of funny going over just exactly what a Taylor Hall-like player could bring to the Habs, because if you go over it just in a very simple way, Taylor Hall would bring scoring to your team. On a Montreal Canadiens team that wasn't able to score too many goals, a Taylor Hall does look like something you would probably want to position yourself towards getting. Let's take a look at this comment thread here on Reddit. The first comment started by F the Bruins Leaf Sends. Very passive username, I know. Not saying I would sign Hall for $10 million, but some of the comments on this Reddit thread are acting like Hall isn't great. The guy won the Hart for a reason. What forward the Habs have had in the last 20 years are better than Taylor Hall? It's probably just Prime Koivu and Kovalev. I certainly would take Hall over Patches, Plekanec, Camilleri, Gianta, Domi, and even Gallagher. Hall is better than Galley point-wise, but he brings so much more than just points. Galley is great and all, and is a leader in the locker room. If Weber wasn't there, he would easily be the captain. I would take someone like that all day over Hall. When Galley gets injured, it's like we have a completely different team, and not for the better. Now, the comment that I like comes after this. We have enough guys that bring more than points. It would be very nice to have some guys that, bring points. And that's a very good argument to make. The Montreal Canadiens have many players on their team who are very good in everything outside the score sheet. Gallagher and Domi are really good at getting under the opponent's skin and driving the Montreal Canadiens towards wanting to do better. But when it comes to strictly point production, I think adding Taylor Hall would make him the best forward on the team in that department. Now, whether or not you would want to sign that kind of player for a max contract, max bonus, 7-year-long deal at $10 million each is up to you. But there is definitely a sense of value in adding a kind of player like this to your lineup. It's just a matter of other questions like whether or not it's actually time, whether or not it's actually appropriate, or if you're willing to push the Canadiens to finally getting out of that hole and making the playoffs legitimately, let's just say. So, comment down below what you think about the additions of Torey Krug and Taylor Hall potentially to the Montreal Canadiens. If you had the money to sign one of these guys, and they were both willing to come on board, who would you sign? Because obviously the Canadiens have cap space and they could work something out if everything went in their favor, but the likelihood of the Canadiens going out there and getting everybody who is really good is just not there. So, to make things fun, let's talk about it in the comments below. Taylor Hall or Torey Krug. And if you don't want to talk about that, hey, feel free to just talk about either of these guys and what they could add to the Habs as well. I'm looking forward to reading all your comments on the Habs and this topic in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Social Live Trolls 99. Link to the description to the Eric Engels article as well. And bye.